Hello, Michael here from Small Robot Studio with another Metahumans and Unreal tutorial. Today I'm going to be giving you some tips on how to improve the likeness of your metahumans based on whatever reference you may have. These tips are going to use a couple of different methods, so if you don't have access to specific software, stick around, there might be something for you in here anyway. Okay, so first tip for getting your likeness a bit closer is, and I talked about this extensively in a separate tutorial, so I'll post a link up for that below. But if you are doing the scan for Mesh to Metahumans, like I showed in my previous tutorial, I would really recommend trying to do a bit of more clean sculpting on top of it. The main thing I would say about it is when I did the scan with Zephyr is I noticed that it does get quite compressed looking. Everything does get a little bit flat and there's a lot less perspective looking in the volumes of all of the parts of the mesh. Aside from that, obviously there's a lot of opportunities to exploit likeness where we can get a little bit more detail into specific things. Like I've got quite bad bags under my eyes, it's not from lack of sleep, which didn't really come up in the sculpt. So by going in and doing a high resolution sculpt in something like Zbrush, but you could also use Nomad, and I'll be showing that in a following tutorial, you'll be able to get a lot closer likeness. And obviously as you're sculpting, you need to use a lot of reference, and Pureref is something you can use overlaid onto your sculpt, but I'll go over how you might do that, showing you in the next tip. So the next tip is to use Pureref in combination with Metahuman Creator. So, and obviously you're using reference anyway because you've taken photos of yourself and you want to bring that up on screen. And I just wanted to talk about the app Pureref just in case you weren't aware of it. And that's this thing I've just brought up on the screen here, and it's got some settings which I'll just quickly go over, which are really useful. So I've just turned the opacity up so you can see what's going on here. And I've got a bunch of reference in this particular Pureref project. Part of it is for the hair groom that I was working on for this one, and part of it is just some facial reference to work from. And hey, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, otherwise you may be missing out on the many tutorials that we're releasing for free each week here on YouTube. And how this app works is it's just a handy little thing that can go over the top of all of your software that you may be working on. So you can have Photoshop up, or you can have this or Unreal or Maya or whatever, and it'll just sit on top. And the handy thing about it, if you're using this Metahumans creator, is that you can set this to transparency and you can overlay it on top of your metahuman to try and use the constructions tools within a metahuman creator to apply some deformation and get it a little bit closer. And one tip that I would also give you is try and use a long lens when you are taking your photos. And I realize that I look like taking my mug shots here. You will have to forget these great photos, but if you use a long lens, it's going to be closer to the focal length that appears to be used in the Metahumans creator. My guess is that this lens is somewhere between an 80 and 100 mil. So the longer you use, the longer lens you use to take the photos, the more perspective compression is going to occur, and you'll get a similar effect happening in your photos. If you use a short lens like 28 or lower than that, or what the default on your phone is usually about a 28mm lens, you might find that you get quite a bit of difference in the way the perspective looks. So with the perspective, what happens is the objects that are closer to the camera, if you're using a shorter lens, will appear larger. So my schnoz here looks a little bit larger. Whereas if I go along to where I used a 100mm lens, you can see my nose proportionally looks a lot flatter and smaller compared to the rest of my face. So you can see something similar here is happening in the Metahumans creator. So how do we use this? Well, I've got Pureref here. The ideal situation is we sort of zoom in here and we try and get it to about the same size as what our metahuman is. Maybe say it's about yay big, and we'll just increase the size here. And maybe a little bit less. And then that way I can go into Metahumans and I can just zoom out a little bit. And this is incredibly fiddly using this. Pureref is not really designed to do what I'm doing here, but it is kind of a handy way to do it. So what you can do is if you right click here and go to settings, you get the settings pop up. So the thing with the settings box that I literally just discovered is that you can right click and move this around. I didn't realize that. And you can go into the colors tab and you can set the opacity. So you can probably guess what I'm going to do here. Set the opacity low, and then we're going to use the sculpting function And I would actually turn off symmetry in this case and do one eye at a time. And then we can try and line up our reference as best as possible. It's not going to be perfect, but the two things that I would really recommend that you try and line up are the pupil, roughly, and the lips. They're pretty good landmarks. The ears I've never really got to line up because they're pushed a little bit further back. It might be a perspective thing. I don't know what lens Metahuman uses exactly. So the best case scenario is you just do the best you can. Once you've got that lined up in Pureref, what you can do is right click here and go to mode and transparent to mouse. So when you do that, you can actually influence things that are underneath the Pureref app, and you won't be clicking on moving it around or anything like that. And by doing so, that means that you'll be able to easily line these things up. Now, I did say maybe don't use symmetry here. If you did want to do this more quickly, you could turn on symmetry. Would want to turn on right to left in this case. And in that way, the right side and the left side are going to be the exact same. I would generally recommend full likeness if you want to do it a bit more concisely. Do one side and then do the other. And take the Pureref off once you're done with it, and just try and align things if you need to make some small adjustments. So you can see it's pretty easy to go through here and make these adjustments to try and find these lines as best we can. See, I'm already getting the lips to look a little bit closer to what mine actually look like. I do know for a fact that my nostrils are not symmetrical. One of my nostrils is smaller than the other, so that's that's something that I can see. The more reference that you got, the better. So if you've got more references that you can work from, obviously you can go from the front and then you can go to the side and do the same thing. What I've really noticed is with the sculpt that I've done, this scan and sculpt that I've done, is that the front looks really close and the side looks really close. At the moment, inside Metahumans Creator, it doesn't look particularly close, and we'll talk about why that is. So especially if you're working from a sculpt or a scan, the next tip is going to be important because we're looking for consistency. And the thing that makes that silhouette of your head a little bit closer to your likeness is going to be your hairline. And if you have facial hair, that as well. So you can see I've just got one of the standard grooms in here, and it is a nice groom, obviously. But it is a lot shallower than my hairline, as my hairline goes back a bit further and doesn't come in as deep at my temples. It's kind of a close approximation, and it can be useful as you're blocking things in to use one of the prefab ones, as well as what I've done here with my sort of beard and goatee. However, I don't have handlebars on my moustache. I don't actually have a moustache really. So while I would love to have handlebars, it is just good to have something like this in there temporarily while you're sort of getting the likeness to work, and then do a custom groom if possible. In terms of doing a custom groom, you've got some options. You could work with something like Blender, which is a free option. I haven't done groom in Blender in a very, very long time, and not in any meaningful way. However, I have done quite a bit in Houdini. And I really recommend Houdini if you've ever tried to do groom in Maya with XGen and you've found it incredibly frustrating and you've wanted to shave your head after using it because it's so incredibly unstable. I would highly recommend checking out Houdini, and particularly the plugin Groom Bear, and I'll show you a little bit of that here in a second. But a few things if you are just trying to get there. I'll give you some tips on how you can block in your hairstyle here first. So here in Unreal, I've got myself here with the hair groom off. You can see that I've already put in the groom for the beard. And I've just got a bit of stubble for where my moustache would be. Something that we can do is go in and edit the skin paint for this. So what we'll do here is just make sure we're looking at the correct thing and edit in blueprint. And what we'll do is with the blueprint for the face here, what we're looking for is this first element here in the material. So we double click into that. If we scroll down, you'll see we've got these different images here, and these are the cavity maps for the base color. So if we click this button here, we can find where it is, and it's this one here. And what we can do is actually just go in and do a quick edit on this. So what you'll do is select the image. You can just right click on it there, and you can go to Asset Actions and Export. And you can just export this as whatever file type you want. Here I've been using Targa. and I'll show you what I've been working on. So I'm just using Photoshop. I've just got the UV map open here, and I've added a couple of extra layers. So all it is adding in a hairline, which I've just blocked in with a dark color here. And I've also added one for the beard. Actually, something else you can do, which I did here, is that my lips have a slightly sharper point. So I went in and made a texture correction to the lips to make them a little bit more similar to what my lips look like. So this is really handy even before you put any actual hair on, just to get this shape for your face, because this really informs the silhouette of your face. So I'd recommend doing this. This is also very useful as a base for creating hair grooms, and I'll go over that in a moment. However, if you did want to do this in Substance, you could also open this texture and apply it to your mesh in Substance. To do that, what you'll need to do is go to your head here, go to the face and edit in the blueprint editor again. Do the same thing, we'll get to the face and we'll just search for that head model. You can select your head model and you can go to Asset Actions and export the head. Then you just apply your texture in Substance, which is your skin texture that we exported previously, and then you can go over and paint the hairline in as you need. Now, something you'll notice here is, because I've got some animation on this, is that this hairline has become sort of visible and invisible as I move. Now, this is because I haven't actually updated all the cavity maps. So with that head, if I go back to the blueprint editor, you'll see that there's actually 4 inputs for these cavity maps. So you'll need to make a copy of each one. If you're just doing the hairline, then these silhouettes that you're going to use for the hair can be in the exact same spot. Pretty much the exact same for all of them, and that will work fine. While on the topic of doing 2-dimensional edits to your skin map, something I would like to point out is that I've just also blocked in these moles that I have on my face. So if you have any distinguishing features to your face, like moles or scars, I do have a scar next to my eye as well, which you could add in. These will help with the likeness quite a bit more than you might expect. And obviously these don't look like particularly realistic moles at the moment. I've just done them very quickly. But I can look at this now and I can actually see a lot more of the likeness to my own particular skin, because these are very visible features of my own face. Now I'm just going to switch to a different model here temporarily and just ignore some of these unusual textures that are occurring on the eyes and the eyelashes. This was just a pre-visualization thing, and this is Érika, who you'll know from the channel. And I've done a very quick and loose groom on her hair as well, and I'll turn off the hair groom so you can see the hairline that I've painted in. So Érika has a fairly deep hairline as well into the center of her forehead, and when you turn the hair back on, you can see how that is something I used in the creation of this, and it's actually really good as a guide for the mask. So if we go into my geometry here, and if I just look at where I was attribute painting, you can see I've actually used that to define and use as a bit of a guide for when I've been painting on here. That needs to be painted in. Very, very, very handy. So I would recommend either using Substance or Photoshop to create these little masks and then apply them in Houdini or Blender, or whatever you're using for your hair grooms, to make it a little bit easier to place the hair in the correct place. Now, in terms of exporting the groom from Houdini and applying it in Unreal, I'm going to cover that in a separate tutorial. So if you're interested in that, make sure you are subscribed. And I would like to take this moment to just quickly shout out our patrons for supporting the channel and bringing this tutorial to you. This wouldn't happen without them. So thank you very much to all of you for your support. If you would like to join, it's only $5 a month and you'll get all the assets as well as bonus content that we create on top of what we do here for free on YouTube. And the last little tip for you I've got here, which is a very simple one, is accessories. If you wear glasses, put glasses on your character, obviously, if you're referencing yourself. So Érika wears glasses regularly, she wears red glasses. I just quickly grabbed these off the internet. I just needed some quick approximation to see how they looked, and they look fine. They pretty much do the trick. They're not quite the exact shape, and the material needs a bit of adjustment there, But just while I'm doing some viz to make sure that it is looking like she's meant to look like, it's a good thing to have in there. And then you can go in and model some glasses or whatever that would make it look a little bit more believable. So things that you might want to consider are obviously glasses, like I said, earrings, nose rings, any piercings in the face, necklaces, those sorts of things. Anything that you or the person you're referencing wears on a daily basis. Do consider adding it in. It's a simple touch, but it can make a huge difference. So just quickly, in terms of getting the glasses to follow the head, so you can see here I've got this animation. What I want to do is I'm just constraining these glasses to the control for the head, because there is going to be no deformation, so this is going to be easy. If I was doing something like a nose ring, I'd want to do a point constraint to like a vertex or something like that. Depending on what the sort of piece was and where it was exactly, you may be able to get away with doing less or more in terms of rigging. So just just selecting the control rig, selecting the glasses, going to constrain and parent. And now that will follow, just as simple as pie. And what we do then is we just select our object. We go to cache, create an Alembic cache, and we just export selection to Alembic. And we do it on the range of frames that we need. And we just import that back into Unreal. And once we are back in Unreal, it is just a matter of popping the glasses into your scene, which I've already done here, so I won't go over that again. That's pretty straightforward. And bringing your glasses into the timeline. Once it's in the timeline, we can just go to our animation and select our glasses animation. If you haven't done this process before with an Alembic to render from Maya, and you would like to know more, I do have a full tutorial walking you through the very basics. If you are a Maya user and you would like to see how it looks, you can use it for any animation. It's actually really good. So you can see there that animation lines up. It does look a little bit offset here because of the way the render viewport works, but you'll have to trust me, it does actually line up in the final render. And that's pretty much it for now. Thank you very much for watching. And I've already talked that I'll be doing a couple more tutorials along these lines, so make sure you are subscribed and stick around for those ones. See you then. That's it for this tutorial. If you found it useful, make sure you leave a like so other people can find it. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, as we're bringing out CG and illustration tutorials every week, just like this one. Become a patron and access tutorial assets, bonus content, a private Discord, and more by clicking the link below.